Welcome to the Flowing Forward podcast, the economics of water in a changing world, a platform dedicated to exploring the pivotal role of water in shaping our global future. Today, we bring you an engaging conversation between two pioneering commissioners, Joyeeta Gupta, a distinguished professor at the University of Amsterdam, and Elizabeth Wathuti, the visionary founder of the Green Generation Initiative. Together, they explore the pivotal role of youth in shaping water sustainability efforts, emphasizing the importance of intergenerational justice. Discover how innovative approaches are being developed to address global water challenges, ensuring that today's youth are empowered to lead the change.
I think we're living in a time when we have seen young people being very vocal about issues that really are affecting our communities and our societies.
I see with my students that the students of today are totally different from the students of before. They are changing the curriculum because they're demanding change. They're changing the way we think because they're demanding that. We cannot do without the youth. The youth are the future. They are going to grow up and this is their world. So they have to participate in this whether they like it or not.
How do our efforts, join together to make much bigger efforts? And that's why I talk a lot about localizing solutions, localizing efforts that we allow room for young people to find a niche, to find a component within the challenge in their communities and pick, a solution that they bring.
This episode sheds light on the urgent need for collaborative action and transformative solutions to protect our planet's most precious resource. Join us as we delve into the critical shifts necessary to secure a sustainable and equitable future for water, our lifeline for generations to come.
In the way we look at water, we need to look at 3 I's, interspecies justice, intergenerational, and intragenerational. And that basically means making space for nature, making space for future generations so that we don't overuse our resources. And within this current generation, so looking at how different countries, different people, different actors overuse or don't get access to water, overpollute, and then receive that polluted water. So we're trying to figure out how we bring these 3 elements together in a justice narrative. Future generations can't represent themselves very easily except in the voices of the children today and the youth today. And so that's an important way of perhaps trying to get the intertemporal generation discussion going. And in the intra-generation, we are looking at people in the same generation across different continents. But they are all present, so we can try to bring them together. So how do you see the way in which youth could perhaps represent the future?
Yeah. One, I see opportunities in the great challenge. Even in the greatest challenges. And the fact that we have the youngest population in the world. With half of the world's population being below the age of 30, it means that we have an opportunity to tap into the ideas and the innovations of the young generation. But also, if you look at the perspective of how the responses of today are going on, it's more of responding to today's needs. But what about the challenges of the future? How do we prepare for that?
If young people have interesting stories that can be scaled up, can you perhaps give us an example of something that has worked and that we want to get other people involved in?
So I see young people able to, number one, lead on innovations on the ground, especially in restoration.
Yeah.
They're actually converting arable land into, massive forest lands that can actually support even in addressing the water scarcity crisis in some of the communities. And I think these initiatives in their own ways, they are locally led, but with an opportunity to replicate elsewhere, either in the countries or across the continent.
Essentially, it's a sort of an afforestation program,
Exactly.
A plant rebuilding program. Why is that so specifically youth-led? Because there's so much knowledge on that over the last, hundreds of years. Why is this something that is typically an innovation of the youth?
So I would say it's purely a lot of young people doing sort of taking up that leadership. Number one, because they understand the urgency in a big way. Actually, a lot of the young people, you find that they're doing it on a daily basis. It's actually a culture. So it's definitely a triple bottom line approach where it's both for the people and for the planet and for prosperity at the same time.
You're saying it's triple bottom line for the planet, but for that person who is doing it, are you doing it because you're earning an income? I'm trying to see how to scale this up.
Yeah.
And if I have to go somewhere else and place this model to our students, then the only way I can tell them is, after class, please go and find a place to plant trees. But it's not easy because every piece of land is owned or managed by somebody else. So if my students, and they have done it in the past, if they want to do a communal urban agricultural project, they have to negotiate for a long time with the municipality to get access to the municipal lands. They can't just go out and plant trees. And then somebody has to pay for the seeds. So, and they're not going to earn from this. This is just for a hobby.
Actually, the reason is to be able to create opportunities, not just for themselves, but also for other young people.
But how do they get the land?
There's an economic approach to it. One, because it's a national initiative. So there is an opportunity for them to be able to, to intervene within the national initiatives. So it's open. It's not that it's limited, that you can't do your initiative
has said
here.
that in this area you can come and plant trees, and then they go to that area and plant trees.
It's actually open, yeah. It's open for everybody to be able to participate. So
but it's a specific area because you can't do it everywhere, right?
No, it's actually so many places. Number one, there's institutions in the schools which have been opened up that somebody who wants to engage in an initiative and green a school, they're allowed to do that. And also there's the forest, the riparian areas. It all depends on what capacity you have and what size of land you can be able to restore. But it's all collaborative efforts. So we have, the young people, we have different institutions.
So I guess I'm the lawyer. And for me, in my university, if we are going to encourage people to green things, I have to get permission about where exactly, because it can't be in the areas where we congregate because there's a fire law and, there are all these different laws. So you have to figure out where you can do it, what you can do, and how you can do. But I don't know whether we can make it an earning opportunity. It would be basically trying to get a culture of people who, instead of watching a television film, are going and trying to do something. But then for that, you have to negotiate things.
It actually also has a lot of earning opportunities because, for instance, the seedlings are produced by the youth groups. So at the end of the day, anybody that wants to do the planting and do like restoration, they have to buy from them. So in terms of like propagation and seedling production, that's one of the opportunities within the space.
Okay.
And also being able to now replicate what they're doing elsewhere. So companies will engage them, governments will engage them. So it's just an example of one initiative that people can be able to.
So it's an interesting story, and the question is, how easy is it to replicate? Because the ability to manage such a storyline might be different in different places of the world. Clearly, it's youth. We cannot do without the youth. The youth are the future. They are going to grow up and this is their world. So they have to participate in this, whether they like it or not. But the bigger question is whether we take climate change, water, nutrients, phosphorus and nitrogen, or we talk about air pollution, we talk about this entire package. In many ways, if you want to develop within that package, the whole development paradigm has to change. And I notice when we discuss it with our students, we have groups of students that are really excited by the notion of redesigning a more modest lifestyle that is commensurate with the space. But then we have also got students who think there's such a big problem, I want to just go out and have a good job, and I'm not going to think beyond that. And do you find that the youth that you're talking to are all in complete agreement about how they're going to address these global issues within the local context, or local issues within the local context?
I think it's a global problem. That's one thing to acknowledge. And I think one thing I always acknowledge is the fact that, yes, the problem is big. And when a young person says it's a huge problem, it is definitely, yes, a huge problem. But then it's creating room to allow for different efforts that then come together and we're able to make that bigger impact together. So I think for me, it's how do our efforts, join together to make much bigger efforts. And that's why I talk a lot about localizing solutions, localizing efforts, that we allow room for young people to find a niche, to find a component within the challenge in their communities and pick, a solution that they bring.
So when you're talking about communities, are you talking about the poor communities, or are you talking about also the rich communities that are over-consuming?
I'm talking about all of them. So localizing means, it's like the local communities. So one, it's the local communities that are affected, but also it depends on the context. So in this context, it's mostly the local communities that are affected, but also the people at the grassroots levels that actually can be able to see the problem. I think the narratives are shifting with also a very massive inclusion of the components of how do we learn locally, how do we tap into indigenous knowledge, how do we combine all these learnings, and also with respect to the fact that we're no longer waiting for the impacts of environmental degradation and climate change to happen. It's actually a reality. So the models right now, it's more of tapping into the two of them. And also in terms of development, how do we make sure that it's for the same thing I said, like people, planet, and prosperity at the same time. So if it's gonna affect, the environment, if it's gonna affect our access to water, then it's not really, a priority. If it's gonna affect how we live, if it's gonna affect the communities, and if it's gonna destroy their lives and their livelihoods, then we cannot term that as development. So it's a holistic approach that makes sure that all
planet, if you protect the planet and we protect people, you think there's still a possibility of prosperity in terms of GDP, or are you defining prosperity completely differently?
So I'm defining prosperity also in terms of you need to improve people's lives at the same time. So if you're getting people to engage in conservation, their lives need to be different. So it cannot be something that actually changes how they live. It has to be a whole approach, the economic approach for the nation, but also the people themselves. So it's, being able to move the society from one level to the other. And if it's not able to do that, then, and that's why I say the triple bottom line, because it combines all the perspectives together and they have to also all balance. I think we're living in a time when we have seen young people being very vocal about issues that really are affecting our communities and our societies, not only for us to address the problems that we are seeing today, but also because the fear is about what's going to happen in the next future if we still continue solving the problems with the same mindset that created it. So that's like the biggest problem, that young people are trying to counter and make sure that at least we have room for, multiple solutions, multiple ideas, multiple innovations, but also different perspectives that every person brings in, that it's also given a priority. So I think also the aspect of urgency, that's also another aspect that we don't see a lot, even with the current processes that we have. And the reason a lot of young people would perhaps, feel frustrated about it is not because of how big the problem is, but it's because of how big the problem is and how small the response to the problem is. So that we're not really, there's no urgency. The challenges we have are really urgent, but not being taken with the urgency that needs to be taken with. So I think we're great to sort of get that perspective of, we need like a different, the change of mindset, the change of how we do things. And I think this is both personal, both in terms of responses with different, governments, industries, startups, but also, an entire systemic change that needs to happen. And I think young people are shifting that. So can you just give me your perspective on that? And also it would be great to hear what elder generations, are doing to create room for that intergenerational collaboration that, that takes up all the, it's like...
So, the elder generation was a younger generation.
Yes.
So when I was growing up, I was seeing young people everywhere fighting all different types of battles. We saw the battle of independence was fought by young people as well as seniors. It was not just elderly people doing it. It was young people doing it. Afterwards, in the 1970s, you were young people on the streets. So young people have been on the streets. They have been in court. They have been in offices. They have been working for the last 70 years. It's not like young people just now have come onto the agenda. And I mean, I have been teaching young people also, and they've been very, very vocal all through the years. They've been fighting for a position somewhere. I think what you're referring to is, has the UN made space for young people? And in fact, youth has always been, not always, since 1992, youth has been invited to all these UN processes, but otherwise youth has always made its views clear, in my view. So it's not something that's new. And youth becomes older, so very soon you will become part of the older community, and then the question is, how do we deal with this intergenerational storyline? The bigger issue, I think, in terms of intergenerational justice is the fact that, and this is actually, to me, it's a combination of intergenerational and intra, because you are this generation, you are not the next generation. Now, within this generation, the question is, how do we treat each other? And what my personal perspective is that people who have been able to escape the poverty trap, who have been able to get into a system of earning, have landed up in an economic system where they did not have to pay for the resources adequately, and they could pollute with impunity. And this has been partly organized through the deregulation of society. So since the 1990s, we have deregulated in many parts of the world. And basically what business has told government is, don't govern us because we can manage things. And through that deregulation, environmental laws have been marginalized. These environmental laws were there to protect the poorer people. They were there to protect the marginalized communities. They were there to protect the environment. But these laws got shrunk. And then it gave more space to the business community to exploit resources. And the business community employs people. So a lot of young people go into businesses, and then that's how that narrative has got worse and worse and worse. And then you see basically an exploitation of the rich versus the poor. In terms of elder generations and younger generations, the elder generations have had more years in society, so their consumption of resources has been much more than somebody who's 15 years old. But there's no guarantee that the person who's 15 years old, when that person is 60, has not used the same kind of resources. So the big debate over here is, are the kids and are the youth of today willing to change so much from the way their parents and grandparents lived, if they are in a rich country or a rich family, so that they can move the needle in another direction? And other poor kids who are aspiring to be like the rich kids, can they also move in another direction? And that's a bit of the challenge that we are facing right now. But it's a very complicated story.
Yeah, I think the aspect of whether the young people are willing to make that change, I think that's where right now a lot of the conversations are coming to. How do you meaningfully engage young people? Is it just everybody, like, governments, institutions? Because it has to be institutionalized, the engagement. Because then if I want to influence change, there's a influencing change from the outside, but also there's influencing change from the inside at the places where the decisions are being made.
Every single day, young people are entering the formal institutions at the bottom echelons. So the question is, how do we deal with the young people who are entering into the World Bank or into government, and the young people who are outside, and the young people who are entering universities, the young people who are becoming farmers? So these are different categories of young people. Okay, and so the question is, how do these different categories of young people interact with each other? So when you look at the young people who enter the banks, are they then mimicking the people who have been there all this time, or are they bringing their new ideas into the forum? And I see with my students that the students of today are totally different from the students of before. They are changing the curriculum because they're demanding change. They're changing the way we think because they're demanding that. So they are all the time there. So when you're saying we need to be invited, I think in many cases you just have to go. I go to places where I'm not invited. I invite myself in.
I see a lot of young people, and the narrative is that even when you're not invited to the table, there's a perspective of bringing your own foldable chair. And I think that has happened a lot.
So I was just at a UN meeting a week ago, and there were experts from Africa, and they were talking about the need to have science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, STEM, and that women need to get into STEM. And then the whole meeting was all about how AI is going to solve a lot of problems in the global south. And I'm very skeptical about that because I think AI needs a lot of energy, it needs a lot of water. But there was a very strong push towards that technology, and this were done by African scholars who are doing that. Do you have a particular perspective on that? Do you see AI as being a way in which it's going to help youth progress?
I think Africa's narrative is very different in terms of the challenges and the solutions to that. And also when we talk about solutions, who is proposing these solutions?
Is it the people? Scholars.
Yeah, but is it the people, is it the people on the ground as they're affected? What is their most immediate, priority right now? I think we need to look at the priorities in terms of the current needs right now. What exactly is the community needs?
When I listen to you, I hear you use recognition justice as your starting point. Yes. And recognition justice is looking at the world from the perspective of the most marginalized.
Yes.
And I'm completely in agreement with you. But if you look at the world from that perspective, you have to completely change the way you think about how education systems are set up. You have to think differently about who has to change behavior and customs. But what I'm finding in my exposure when I'm talking to students in different parts of the world is that when I'm explaining the environmental problem, they see that as extremely upsetting. They see that as depressing because they see it not just as hampering their environment, but of hampering their aspiration to live like people who are richer.
Yeah.
And that aspirational fear is also making them reject, in some cases, the environmental arguments. So you don't see in a broad scale, you don't see, in my view, a common homogeneous argument appearing from youth. Those who are using the recognition justice perspective, and I think there you and I are probably on the same page, we are trying to look at the world from the perspective of how the weakest, the most marginalized can get access to resources and how they can be also compensated for the harm that has been done to them. But if you look at the remainder of the youth and people, you will find that they are much more focused on how do I get a good job, how do I earn, how do I buy my first car, and how do we get fossil fuel into Africa to mimic the progress of the global north. And that's the narrative I'm hearing when I'm talking across the board to people or teaching. So I don't get from these people the same narrative that we must actually perhaps think that we should do strong demand side management, that we should try to avoid fossil fuel, we should go for renewables, we should clean up the environment, we should go for afforestation. I don't get that narrative from this community. And you're seeing also in the election processes worldwide, even though youth do have votes because they're a large percentage of the people, I don't see a common perspective coming up.
It will solve the problems if we allow all perspectives, because the same thing is we have an innovation, but innovation on its own is not enough.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Flowing Forward podcast as we navigated the economics of water with our esteemed guests. We're excited to announce that the Global Commission on the Economics of Water will unveil its final report on October 17th. This pivotal document will provide groundbreaking insights and practical strategies to advance global water sustainability. We invite you to stay connected with our podcast for more expert discussions and inspiring stories of collaboration. Together, we can drive meaningful change and ensure a sustainable future for water resources worldwide. Until our next episode, let's continue to flow forward toward positive transformation.